People of Reddit who have straight up walk out on a job, what was your breaking point? Mild and boring. I was working an incoming call center job selling electronics. I walked into work one day, put my headset on, put my finger on the button to take a call, then took my headset off. I walked into my manager's cubicle and said, "I really don't want to work here anymore. This is really boring." He said, "I feel you. I don't like it either." I said, "Do you want me to put in 2 weeks' notice?" He said, "Nah, just bail out of here and get a drink." We shook hands. He quit a week later. Story 2. Was working at an ice cream fry place on the beach. It was crap. The owner sucked, the cook was dirty, it was just a straight up a horrible job. One night I ended up pulling the muscles in my arm, bad enough that I couldn't move my fingers trying to scoop ice cream that just came out of the deep freeze. The new tubs were always rock hard, and you'd have to let them sit before they were use-able. But that slowed things down, and boss lady hated that. I finished my shift with one arm, then went to the hospital. I got a DHS note stating I was not to work for 2 weeks. They called me in the next day to work. I explained that I have a note, but they insisted I could just work cash, and they were swamped, so I went in. Immediately, they started yelling at me for not being fast enough, how I was faking it, because you can't get that hurt from ice cream, that I wasn't doing as much as everyone else. When the owner finally appeared, I asked if I could talk to her. She told me she had people coming to drink on her boat and didn't have time for me. That's when I snapped. I told her that was fine, but she was probably going to miss party time with her friends because I quit. It wasn't my intention to quit. I was just going to ask her to lay off me a bit, as I shouldn't even be working tonight, and my arm was in a sling. I walked out and went and sat on my boat watching the sunset, waiting for my dad to pick me up. She worked cash the rest of the night and could clearly see me through the window. Turns out they didn't report the workplace injury. So when I got a call asking me about the injury and what happened, I also let it slip that they forced me to come in knowing I had the note. They got fined. I live in Ontario in a tourist town. Everybody has a boat. I am a girl and have sad, small, pathetic wrists. It's not my boat, but the family boat. We all have keys to it. Dad would come to pick me up because I would bike to work, and he would pick me up after 11 p.m. when my shift was done, so I wasn't biking down back roads at night alone. Story 3. I worked for this company that sold ADT security equipment. I did door-to-door sales. It was essentially us walking around trying to sell this package deal. If someone took it, we got paid $200 for the entry, and then the manager who signs the paperwork gets paid $100 plus whatever extras he sells them on. One day, I am showing the new girl around. I let her do the knocking because girls always get warmer welcomes. This guy lets us in and I call my manager. No answer. Whatever, I can do it. I write up literally all the paperwork. Sell him on a bunch of extra stuff too. Easily would have made over $500 on this sale. Manager comes in at the last minute and literally grabs the paperwork out of my hand and reads it. Gets this big ducking smile on his face and signs it. Girl got $200. He got $500. I got $0. Didn't show up the next day. Story 4. I was accused of stealing money as a manager and was livid. The cameras just so happened to not being working that night, and a manager helping at our store from another was filling in at ours. Her store had theft issues, and then she just starts filling in. And all of a sudden, we have theft issues. They wouldn't believe a teenager manager's side of the story instead of an established manager, so they told me to pay up and I quit. Turns out she got caught 6 months later. Story 5. I had been the late person in my office for a few years, even though others had been hired after me. Finally, my opportunity came to get an earlier work time when my supervisor announced he was leaving. I asked my coworkers, and everyone was okay with it. Then the new supervisor shows up, and because he's friends with our manager, he goes and tells her he doesn't think it's fair that he has to stay until 4:30. With that, she announces that everyone will have to take time on the late shift. I explained to her in front of everyone that I had done that for years, and nobody ever volunteered to do it for me, so I refused. She informed me that everyone would be doing. I knew when to just shut up. So at that point, I began looking for a new job. A month goes by and she calls me into her office and asks me why I wasn't going along with her new policy of everyone working late. I informed her that I wasn't going to do it, and that was simply that. She then gave me the ultimatum of, "Well, if you don't, I really don't know that we need you to be here then." At that point, I thought of how I was already in the process of having my next job nailed down within a few weeks, so I looked at her and smiled, said, "Give me a few minutes then. I'll have my stuff packed in 5 minutes and I can be on my way." Her jaw dropped as she doubted that I'd challenge her. She quickly backpedaled her threat and told me that I didn't have to leave like this. I smiled, ignoring her now, and commenced to leaving and packing my stuff. It was the greatest day of my working life. I felt as though the weight of the world had been lifted from me. Story 6. This happened over 20 years ago. I used to work in a cafe. Manager was in a relationship with a former employee who had been previously dismissed. I was the supervisor and I was next in line for the assistant manager. Our boss resigns and my manager gets promoted and tells me that his GF is coming back to work as his 2IC. I told him I would walk out the moment she set foot in the cafe. I start my regular shift at 7. She and my boss rock in at 8. I take off my apron and wish them luck. They tried to get me back, but I found a job straight away. Duck, it felt good, story 7. On my phone, so having trouble editing. I was a live-in nanny when I was 20 for a lumberjack in Alaska. Single father in his early 40s with 2 toddlers. It was his off-season when we were negotiating everything. We agreed I would move in 2 weeks without pay before he was to go back to work so I could get a feel for everything and his kids would get to know me with him there instead of just being left with a stranger one day. So I moved in and immediately started working. Got the kids on a real schedule, started potty training the 2-year-old who was clearly ready for it, went into talks with the father about preparing the 4-yo for pre-K in the fall, which he somehow did not know about. I was on top of things. And Bossman, he was elated to have a free anytime babysitter. So he could work? Hell no. So he could disappear on the other side of the island with his buddies drinking and not call or go crab fishing all day. He also had a weird fascination with inviting his friends over to show me off. It was creepy AF and was some kind of weird ego trip. The kitchen, dining, and living area were essentially all one room and I could hear them sitting at the table talking about me as I went about my chores. Damn, man, she's good. I want one. Had a taste yet? All kinds of creepy crap like that while I'm just trying to work. 4 weeks in, he still had not gone back to work and was not paying me. His argument was, how can I pay you if I don't have a job? Fair enough. Weren't you supposed to go back to work 2 weeks ago? Well, yeah, but it was in an area I don't like very much, so I told him, no thanks. Seriously? You have an employee to pay and kids to provide for. You don't have the luxury of, nah, I'll pass. Another 2 weeks go by and I've been there taking care of these kids, dealing with the dad getting crap-faced, being emotionally abused. He would come home screaming if a cabinet was open a little bit, saying I was destroying his kitchen. I'm sorry I left the kitchen cabinet open a little to attend to one of your crying children, as is my job. Anyway, I tried to have one final discussion with him about how he needed to go back to work and I needed to be paid, especially as I was working well over my agreed-upon hours. He started yelling at me about cabinets again. He started whining about how I complained too much because it was the 3rd time I brought up not being paid. I explained he was meant to start working and paying me a month ago. He started screaming and literally lunged at me. I retreated a bit and just kind of held up my hand and said, okay, you clearly don't know how to have a rational conversation about these issues. I've tried to discuss the matter with you and you clearly do not get it. I'm meant to be a paid employee to care for your children while you work. I'm not your wife or your girlfriend here, doing this for free. So as of this moment, I quit. I'm going to my room to pack my things. I'll be on the Thursday morning ferry back to the mainland. I went to my room as quickly as I could, locked the door, started packing, and emailed his fiancée on the mainland, asking her to pick me up at the other end. I'd been in contact with her about the abuse for a few weeks, and she thought it was only her who went through that when she saw him. She broke up with him the same night. He came to my room trying to convince me to stay. He seemed calm and like he might start to get it. I barely opened my door to talk to him, but his calm facade quickly evaporated again when he started in on the same stuff about not wanting to work because I told him I needed to be paid. He had this look of hatred, and his eyes were black. I locked the door again and packed faster. The next day, he wouldn't let the kids talk to me or say goodbye. I could hear them crying, wanting me to stay, and it hurt. Thursday morning, he carried my stuff to his truck, drove me to the ferry terminal, threw my stuff out in the muddy snow, and drove off. I only had enough money for the ferry because I babysat for a friend of his once while there, and they paid me just enough for a ticket. Being in a small Alaskan town, everyone knew who I was and the situation. Everyone at the ferry terminal was saying they were surprised I lasted as long as I did, again, only a month and a half. Word spread to the people on the ferry, and someone from the galley came and got me asking if he had let me eat breakfast that morning. I said no, and she took me to the galley, and they made a free meal for me and just kind of rallied around me. I ended up stranded in Alaska for another month and a half, living with his then ex-fiancée until my family could afford to get me a plane ticket back to Texas. It was a hell of an experience, story 8. I did this at my job at Golden Corral. First off, it's ducking Golden Corral. So duck that in the first place. And my managers were the absolute worst. One was just a major douchebag, and the other one was a super bitter old man. Anyways, the week before I walked out on this job, my nan passed away. This was super devastating for me. She was my favorite person. So on my day off, when I found out she passed, I went up to the restaurant to tell my manager, Terry, that I would be out for a few days due to a death in the family. I had been crying all night and all day, so my face was a wreck. I walk up to him, and before I can even get the words out, I bust into tears telling him the news. He just rolls his eyes at me, huffs and puffs, and tells me, "Fine, Bailey. I'll handle it, geez." I was only 18 at the time, so I was a blubbering 18-year-old girl who just lost their nan, and he was upset about it. I mean, me missing a few days really didn't matter there. We weren't short-staffed. So I come back the following week, ready to work. My other manager, who is the douche, was working this day. He was giving me major crap about me not being there the past week. I just ignored it because I didn't want to waste the energy of being upset. So he's giving me crap my whole shift, and I asked to go to the bathroom. He tells me no. I can stand at the register until the end of my shift. I just took my apron off then and there, all dramatic-like. I grabbed my bag and just walked out. There was a line out the door. I didn't give a duck. Duck that place. Story 9. Honestly, I just need to finally get this out. I had a female GM and a male AGM that were obsessed with looks. The GM especially wanted us to wear our hair down, even though it was supposed to be up, and would ask why we had our hair up. She would make faces at us if she didn't like our appearance. It sounds petty, but it's exactly what she would do. She wanted us to wear tight clothes and couldn't fathom why I preferred short hair, why Elle liked to have my hair up, why I didn't wear makeup. I've always had relatively good skin. I'm no supermodel, but I don't look hideous without makeup, and I didn't and still don't see it as a major deal to not wear, and we weren't required to wear makeup. I started getting comments from the new GM and her male AGM. Every day I worked, I was put down for my lack of makeup or my hair being up instead of down. It sucked, and I hated every second of it. Some of the major incidences include, was told by the AGM and FOH manager that I should feel threatened for my job since they hired a new hostess, and it was nice that someone finally knows what they're doing around here. I was cut, I did ID work, clocked out. We had 4 hostesses standing up at the host stand, and the foyer of the restaurant was empty. I decided to ask about a reservation that we were having problems finding room for. I had been the board runner and wanted to make sure everything was okay. The GM came up to me and said, "You need to leave my hosts alone so they can do their job," and that I needed to just leave the restaurant. I told her it was raining, and she told me I just needed to wait somewhere else and get away from her host stand. The GM looked me up and down disgusted, while the AGM asked me, as he often did, if I had even showered that day. I had, if anyone was wondering. I requested my birthday off, but was scheduled to work in the evening. A server who had hosted before covered my shift for me with a manager's approval. The next time I worked, the GM told me that I need to be responsible and think of the restaurant, not just myself. According to her, it was crazy busy on my birthday, and since I wasn't there to help, the host stand crashed, and everything was a mess. According to another host, everything was fine that night. I walked into work on a Saturday to be greeted by a host stand with 4 other hosts as well as Maureen. I was putting my purse away at the stand when the GM asked me to check the bathrooms. Another host said she had just gotten back from checking, and in front every single host GM said, "I know, I just wanted Ender's fan to look in the mirror." I locked myself in the bathroom and cried my heart out for 10 minutes. The day decided to quit the whole morning. She kept making snide little remarks about my appearance, how my tie looked like crap, and literally making faces at me. I got fed up when she gave me a particularly snobby look and said something under her breath. I asked her if something was wrong with me, and I insisted. She told me what was wrong. A different manager kind of pushed us over into one of the private rooms so I could talk to the GM, just me and her. GM tried to play it off at first that she was just teasing, no ducking way, and then that she does this with everybody, a lie. And then that, honestly, I looked unprofessional for the job. How come I was never formally sat down and told to wear makeup? If it was really that bad, why wasn't I ducking notified? I was pissed. And when I started crying, I told her that I was not sad, but I was so angry at her and at her AGM. And then I asked if I should give her back the apron because I didn't need it anymore because I was done. She said no. I just left and walked to my boyfriend's house. I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried, and every time I tell the story, I cry, and if I'm being honest, I'm at work crying now. I went through 8 months of being constantly told I was ugly, smelly, gross, repulsive, not good enough. I've always had self-esteem issues, but this compounded it. I hated myself. It sounds ridiculous, but I still hear their voices in my head telling me how bad I look. Story 10. One of my first jobs was working as a dishwasher for a dive bar that was owned by an aunt of mine. She wasn't really great at management, and we had a huge staff turnover rate for the year or so that I worked there. One week, when we were particularly understaffed, my aunt asked me to take on some wait staff and prep duties, which required me to stay to close, which was hard on me as I was in high school at the time. But I needed the money, and the hours towards close were really easygoing. After continuing that schedule for a while, payday finally arrived, and I was dismayed to find that there wasn't a noticeable change in my pay. I brought this up to my aunt, who told me that no one came in for the last couple of hours of each of my shifts. So she clocked me out after all the work was done. I wanted to tell her that's not how it worked, but instead I took off my apron and walked out right as my shift was about to start. It's been decades, but I don't think I've spoken to her since. Story 11. Started work at an IT shops in the public sector on the premise that they valued their employees and paid them well. I had an interview with the organization. It went incredibly well, and I was optimistic going into the job. I felt I connected with the managers, and I resonated with their idea of helping out the customer. At my last job, I generally tried to go the extra mile for for the people I helped solely because I knew almost all of them personally. So I start working at the place. First thing I find out is that while the job pays well, all of the techs are in a cramped room with hardly any personal space between any of them. I was literally shoulder to shoulder with two other techs, with another one behind me, and hardly any room to move my chair or do anything personal in downtime. Not a huge deal, I originally thought, despite my anxiety. I can live with this because extra pay. Next thing they do is, despite my tier 2, tier 3 experience, is throw me on phones for extended periods of time. They would often throw me on phones in place of another tech's shift when they were supposed to be on phones. It wasn't a training thing either, I came to find out. It was a favoritism thing. Okay, I can deal with this. Next, they had me in violation of my contract by having me haul office equipment for the organization since they were currently doing a move. This is where I began to get irritated because at my last job, I started and ended up moving a giant printer despite not knowing that this was forbidden in my contract. Additionally, the new place got upset that I was wearing sneakers to do my job, despite me crawling under desks and now hauling office crap like cubicle walls. I don't want to wear my expensive dress shoes loafers if I'm hauling office equipment. All the while, I was getting lectured by a manager on dress code while he was wearing sneakers himself. Next, I got in trouble for going above and beyond for a user and spending time to help them out, despite being sold by our managers that we do what we can for the user. What's worse, if we didn't do everything we could, our own managers would sell us out and not back up our decisions when the users would try to take advantage of our policies or violate them outright. I can only assume our NetSec was awful at the place because of all the loopholes we created for users at the expense of our network security. I got in trouble again for helping a user and correctly identifying the source of their issue was a subnet issue on the network, and escalating it to the appropriate team and contacting them, since I had experience working networking issues myself. Got in trouble because the team didn't appreciate that I didn't inform my team manager, who would then go to his manager and then relay the escalation to the networking team. Nor did they appreciate me troubleshooting and identifying the issue despite it being simple. What finally caused me to snap at this place was when my team manager, the thou shalt not wear sneakers but I shall guy, cracked a joke at my expense and said he'd let me know when I became a capable technician. I stood up from working the phones, again, promptly gave him the finger, and told him that I quit and that he didn't know crap about NetSec, and just bitter that I had to correct his ass on multiple occasions. I told him that only having his A+ certification, an entry-level tech certification, did not make him a capable technician, and that he didn't know as much as he thought he did. I walked out, thankfully had money saved up, and just took a month off before finding the new job that I've been in for 2.5 years now and far happier. That place was an absolute crap stain. Sadly, I was warned about it by people that I should have trusted despite others telling me that it was a paradise to work for. Even more so, I was warned about the manager guy that I worked under. There were so many issues with that place, but it was by far the most toxic work experience I've ever had in it. It's also the reason I outright refuse to do help desk work ever again and stick to just cyber. I don't care how much the help desk pays. Story 12. My headcount on the network engineering team was moved to another new team under the lead of the same person as the help desk. I expressed my concern that this feels much more like I'm being demoted and moving in the wrong direction, career-wise. They said over and over that it would give me opportunity to grow and move towards my goals as a people leader project manager. Well, I was in the job for about 6 months of exactly what I expected from the job. It was being run like a help desk, and nothing they promised me came true. And worst of all, she started to say my work quality had gone down, but also stated that she hadn't ever gotten a single complaint about me from anyone. I tried to explain what this new position was supposed to be, that it was more than just help desk tasks. She disagreed. Consistently, I put up better numbers than anyone else on the team. I was the most knowledgeable and did everyone's documentation. Year-end review time. I get called into HR. They say, Temrout, we are going to put you on a review plan because of your poor performance. I smiled and said, okay, I think this is ridiculous. I'm going to go clean out my desk. It felt so good to be done with that place. Story 13. Crafty-ass telesales company wouldn't let me take a day off work to attend my grandmother's funeral. Their reasoning, I wouldn't meet my sales quota if I did. Story 14. I worked at a bakery with nearly 60 employees. I was at the shipping department with 4 dudes. We had an amazing work dynamic relationship. Everyone understood and followed the rules. There was a time for joking and a time to pump orders. We all knew it, and work was as splendid as it was productive. That was until 2 brothers started working with us. Not only were Mike and Jim super ducking loud and obnoxious, they were cheap and lazy to a point that the whole dynamic within the shipping department changed. We wouldn't joke around anymore because these guys would go the extra mile. Me, being the only girl in the dept, was even more difficult because Jim would be making dirty remarks all the time. The worst ducking people I've ever worked with. There's nothing more annoying than some arrogant cock being lazy who demands more money and takes credit for work he did not make. We hated them since day one. These guys were so ducking terrible. We had BQQs on which we would all bring whatever we would eat to throw in the grill, including our drinks and appetizers. We invited them over to see if maybe they were different outside of work, and that was the last time we asked them to come over. We all brought steak, fish, beer, substances, appetizers, etc. What do these ducking guys show themselves with? No ducking joke. These guys showed up with a $5 bag of fried chicken from Albertson. No beer, no substances. My brother was grilling steak and I was finishing up the ceviche when Jim asks my brother in front of everyone to hurry up with the meat because Amen needs to eat. My brother was already annoyed because they were popping beers like water and smoking from everyone's substances. My brother points at him with the grilling tongs. Shut the duck up. You bring disgusting fried chicken that nobody is eating, no beer, and demanding my meat? Nothing from this grill is yours. If you want to eat meat, bring some. You cheap duck piece of crap. My bro is a 6'3" guy that has been boxing and playing soccer since forever. You don't duck with him. They ate a bit of the ceviche and left to buy some meat, but never came back. Anyway, fast forward to one day that these guys were being reprehended by our manager. Jim got so loud and started screaming. My manager just walked away from him, shaking his head and laughing at this guy's stupidity. That same day, my favorite coworker, Ben, quiet, awesome, funny, geeky guy, disappeared for the rest of the day. He just vanished from the bakery, and nobody knew what had happened. Turns out while Jim was screaming, Ben just couldn't handle it anymore, lost his crap, and simply walked away and never came back. Ben left an amazing workplace because two were lazy, arrogant, loud, dumb, and just stupid. And we couldn't fire them because they were black. They actually said this. My boss, being a rich guy that never came over, took this seriously, and the chicken crap just left it to us. I left the bakery shortly after. So did my manager, so did my bro, so did the other guys from shipping. Finally, I heard they tried to intimidate the main baker. That's when the boss finally man up and fired the bananas. Ben, I know you're a Redditor, so if you're reading this, you will always be my hero. Let's play some D&D at the warehouse. Story 15. 'Twas a speck of dust that broke the camel's back. I worked retail in the early 90s, started as a sales guy at a luggage shop, one of those higher-end places in the mall. Problem was the mall was in a fairly economically depressed town, not really near any airports whose major employer, IBM, had left. While there certainly were bunches of government employees that probably had to do a bunch of traveling, and it wasn't like they'd shop in my store, they'd go get budget stuff at Sears or something. We worked commission as well. The store had a staff of 5, manager, team lead, 3 regs, open 9-9 every day but Sunday. Within a month of starting, the lead bailed and I got promoted. Manager was a beat-down divorcee who always just seemed to have a rough time of it. After 3 months, around October, she calls quits and one of the last 2 regs quits. I get semi-promoted to manager with 1 employee. I ask about when I can hire someone, and they say that I'm too young, 19, to make such decision. Okay, so now I'm working 12-hour days. I can't give the keys to someone who isn't a lead. For 4 weeks until the district manager comes down and hires a few flakes and promotes my current reg to lead. She was actually pretty good, but my age as well. Big business meeting to go over the Christmas strategy. All the managers in the country get flown into Cleveland. I'm 19 in Cleveland in the era before real internets and cell phones, not allowed to rent a car. All the other managers are partying it up and rekindling weird, creepy relationships with each other from the year before. Lots of adultery going on since everyone was in the same hotel. I'm basically doing diddly in the evenings and going to these how to sell meetings and how to process returns so that your books look good and sketchy stuff like that. District manager gives me my sales plan for the holidays. I've got to sell like $50K worth of luggage between then and New Year's. I boggle and he careens me out because they'd already lowered the plan by 10% from last year. I sold maybe 8K a month in my crafty store. Damn it, we get flown back to our stores, or in my case, a couple hours away from my store, with a new inspired outlook or some crap. My staff and I bust our asses selling that holiday season. I actually make plan. First time it had ever happened in that store in the 3 years it was open. I'm still some 19-year-old kid and I was in the top 5 against plan in the whole country. District manager comes down and I assume it is to congratulate me. Instead, it's to change my plan numbers for the rest of the year to reflect how well we did in 6 weeks of selling. No special bonus, no good job, nothing. And then he notices some dust on the bottom of one of the racks. I'm with a customer and he calls me over and berates me in front of the store for daring to have some dust on a rack that's already pretty much covered in various travel accessories. I took my tie and jacket off and told him that the customers by the Halliburtons might want some help. My lead walked out with me. Went by there a few days later to pick up my check in district, who lived hours away by plane. was dusting racks in the windows on his hands and knees because neither of the flakes he'd hired could be trusted with keys. Duck that guy and that company. I'm pretty sure they ended up an Amazon casualty anyway. Story 16. I used to work shifts at a company that did post-production and editing, dubbing, etc. The way the shifts worked is we'd do 13-hour days but have a week of 5 on, 2 off, and then a week of the opposite, 5 off, 2 on. So 1 week I'm asked to do overtime on my 2 off days, which results in me doing a 7-day week totaling 76 hours. I also had a job at a restaurant where I worked 1 4-hour shift every other Wednesday. That was my previous job, and I kept that shift as a foot in the door. I like to have a backup. So, adding 4 hours at the restaurant, I'd done 80 hours that week. Monday morning, I was shattered and was telling a colleague, let's call him Rat Duck, that I'd done 80 hours. Cut to me being called into the boss office because Rat Duck had run to tell them I was tired due to having worked so much. There were about 3 of them, and they blasted me for working so much and having another job, and that I couldn't perform my job well enough, having worked so much, etc., etc. I remained silent. When they were done, I asked them, you do realize that 76 out of those 80 hours were here, right? Cue confused looks. They had no idea. No thanks for doing overtime, just a bollocking. They tried to apologize, but I packed up my stuff and left on the spot. Was full-time at my other job within 24 hours. Story 17. I worked for a blood donation company in the component production department that separated the blood into whole blood, platelets, and plasma. We used a walk-in freezer to store some items long-term to prevent them from expiring. My friend, he hired on about a month after I did, and I noticed some water pooling in front of the freezer. And we told management that someone was going to slip and fall, so they should put some traction strips down. That never happened. There was a shooting at a church around here, and the company did a bunch of blood drives to milk the public's sympathy, and we were slammed. I was running components back, and guess who slips and falls? Yeah, me. Guess what went down during the night? Traction strips. I tore my quad muscle and had to go on workman's comp. The first couple of days, I was able to do the sit-down job of scanning in donations or tubes to go out for testing. Unfortunately, the people that normally did those didn't like having to do actual work and complained, so I was moved back to the centrifuges to work. I was told that they didn't have a chair high enough for me to sit, so I had to stand. I was too young and ignorant to know better. I convinced them to let my friend drive me for my next visit so that we could chill and hang out on the drive across town during the middle of our shift. Once there, the doctor told that I was not making satisfactory progress. I was asked if I was staying off of my leg as much as possible, and I told them that I was made to stand at work. The doctor was not happy about it. On the way back, we were lamenting how crafty our manager was, how he played favorites and didn't listen to our concerns. We had a couple of verbally abusive coworkers who liked to make shifts uncomfortable, and how the company didn't seem to care about the work hazard until someone got hurt. We got the idea to call in and quit. Both of us were way too excited about the prospect, so we drove to my house and called up the manager. The conversation was something like this, using initials to hide names. Jay, hey there, C. This is Jay. I'm not going to come back into work. Actually, I quit. C. What about PM me regret? Oh yeah, he's right here. He wants to talk to you too. Me. Hey, C. Yeah, I'm not going to back to work either. Ever. C. You guys can't do this. If you don't come back to work, you won't ever see your last paycheck, me. Funny. I think the Wage and Labor Board would have something to say about that, so we will be in Thursday to pick it up. Man, duck you guys. Before he passed, my grandfather had told me stories about the Wage and Labor Board and how it worked. He was in personnel for a manufacturing plant, and he knew a lot about that kind of stuff. That's the only reason I was aware that an employer could not withhold pay and thought to say that. My friend and I had talked about that possibility. We learned later that C had to work on the production line. While we were brave over the phone, we weren't in person, so we went up Thursday before C got to work and grabbed our checks. I ended up talking to a phlebotomist a few years later and learned that the guy and his 2 favorites still worked there. One of the people who careened about not getting to do the sit-down job they normally did had died, and there'd been a large turnover in the rest of the staff. That dude is the worst manager I've ever had. Looking back, I probably could have sued them over the whole fiasco, but that thought never crossed my mind back then. My friend and I still reminisce about horror stories from working there and the 2 verbally abusive jackwagons we worked with. Story 18, McDonald's. Had been working there 2.5 years in high school, stepped down from being a manager so I could finish school strong. Went back to old place where one of the managers there hated me and was very jealous of me being promoted a year prior. Halfway through my shift, he comes back and tells me he's going to make my life hell for the time I work there. I stop washing dishes, go to the front, clock out, and leave. Next day, I'm working at Quiznos, who was thrilled to hire me. Story 19. Not me, but a coworker. I was asked by my boss to work with the IT department to collect all his personal photos from the company drive Yes, you read that correctly, and burned them onto CDs. Midway through the project, during a coffee break, I hear a particularly choked back screech that resonates through my memories. I rush back to the closet where it lived only to be confronted by an image of the office manager, clipping a blindfolded client's stuff with clothespins. There are hundreds of these files, with various highly esteemed members of the industry. Turns out my boss and the office manager were moonlighting as a high-end escort. They would take pictures, videos with their clients, then blackmail them with these pictures to further fund the business. And we found their blackmail stash. One of the members of the team went pale, put down her coffee mug, and walked straight into the HR office to quit, the entire time muttering to herself, "I don't get paid enough for this crap. This is wrong." The head of it, who we shall call Phil, accidentally deleted the files, and I left the company shortly thereafter. Turns out the manager and boss had bigger fish to fry and were arrested for tax fraud. Oh, the stories from that absolute crap show of a job. Story 20. Being told that I could not comfort a resident that was sobbing in the hallway. Her sister-in-law had just moved in the week before, and she loved having her brother stop by and chat with her because none of her kids would visit. Sill pass in the middle of the night from an aneurysm. Very unexpected, and she was healthy, so her husband, resident's brother, started threatening staff and saying he'd sue and that they killed her. He gathered his wife's belongings and didn't come back. Cue me walking down the hall the day after. I'm doing a quick clean, so just grabbing trash and flushing toilets. I see this tiny woman screaming in her wheelchair down the hall. I put my card up and asked her what was wrong because there were no nurses or other staff nearby. I'd heard what happened, but I didn't think about what it would do to her mentally. She started going on about how there was no point in living because no one loved her anyway. I'd like to note, this little lady had her crazy moments, but was as sweet as could be. I always loved chatting with her in passing. I'm on my knees in an instant telling her not to say that people do love and care for you, while giving her a much-needed hug. She calmed down, and I helped her back into her room. It took maybe 5-10 minutes out of my day, which is less than the break I'm due in about 30 minutes. When I go back to get my cart, there's another housekeeper whispering to the supervisor above ours, "Out boss, and pouting at me. Karen smirks and runs off the other direction as the supervisor walks over to me, tells me we need to talk now in her office. I lock my crap back up again and follow her. I honestly can't think of anything I've done wrong and didn't think it was anything. She makes me sit down and explains that I'm not allowed to speak to the residents anymore. I'm wasting too much time and not getting my job done, and the other housekeeper had been complaining to her about it. What the heck? I picked up that Karen slack all the time and always got my work done. Ask our boss. But this supervisor informs me that she doesn't trust what my boss says because it's obvious that we're friends. Because I talk to her and treat her like a ducking human being too. I'm then put on notice that the other housekeeper is to alert the administrator if she catches me talking or helping residents again. I'm pissed, but I've got to be cool about it. I went to the administrator a few days later when she was in to explain the situation, and she said it didn't matter. I didn't need to talk to people that lived in the home. That wasn't my job, and if they needed something, hit their call button. I wanted to pull my hair out. I love these people. I got to know them. They were often ignored by the nurses when they needed something simple like their curtains opened or picking up something they'd dropped on the floor. So I went around and apologized to all my residents, said I couldn't work here anymore, but I'd come to visit so I could talk to them and help them. Some of them were pretty upset, but knew what was going on, as the new administration had gotten rid of most of the decent workers there. I then unfastened my badge and walked into the admin's office and sat it on her desk in front of her and said, "You'll need that," and left. Crafty thing is, I wasn't allowed to come back, so I never got to see them again, except for funerals. Makes me cry just thinking about it. Those people deserve so much better. Story 21. It wasn't a breaking point exactly, just a moment in time where I said, "Duck you," because the boss said something highly inappropriate. I used to work at Long John Silver's back in high school. My senior year, I was dating an abusive guy who ended up pushing me so hard that I went to a mental hospital for attempted died. My parents, of course, called LJS and told the manager that I would not be coming in. And of course, because of the whole doctor-patient confidentiality thing, she didn't ask questions. When I came back, everyone wanted to know where I was and why I hadn't been in. All they knew was that I went to a hospital. They expected to see me bandaged up since I was gone for quite a while, but I walked in just fine, and that confused the crap out of everyone. And of course, there were questions. I, of course, answered, and everyone went into a series of, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened. I wouldn't ever get caught in something like that. I'd hightail it out of there, and if you need anything, let me know." Well, the shift manager was a giant banana. He wasn't at first until this day where I pegged him as in a hole. He pushed me very hard that day, expecting me to do clean things that weren't a part of my job. I did them, and then I hear him in the back say, "You do realize it was your fault, right?" I looked at him and I said, "What?" and he said, if you weren't such a ducking pussy, he wouldn't have laid a hand on you. I could feel the room go dead silent. Even the people at the counter were perfectly still, mouths hung open, and that was the last thing that happened before I said, I'm leaving now. Then I had a panic attack in my car, thinking it was just all my fault. Story 22, Taco Hell. When I was 16, I worked at Taco Bell. There's not many options when you don't have any sort of resume. To those that worked there, it was known as Taco Hell, and for good reason. It refers to the fact that the company uses low-quality ingredients and has been found using non-food-grade, genetically engineered corn in its tortillas, as well as beef that wasn't totally all meat. Plus, everyone wanted to eat there, probably because you were hungry 10 minutes after you ate there. So working there was always pure hell. Quay, the new shift manager, the guy was a complete a-hole. My first clue to this was when our GM introduced the guy. He was wearing an Orange County Choppers John vest and a hat pulled low, so you could barely see his dark eyes squinting out at everyone with hatred. He had some jailhouse tats and a toothpick jutting from his scraggly beard. I went to shake his hand and he stuck his fist out to fist bump mine and punched it. Beyond the superficial looks, which I try not to judge folks on, he was a rude person to everyone, lazy, and he spent most of his shift high and we all knew it. The dude also had a severe anger problem, triggered by about anything. Once a person returned a taco and he threw it across the back at us on the line, threw a pan against the back wall, and punched the wall so hard it dented the wall. Insanely hostile. He routinely kept me past 11 p.m. on school nights. He would threaten me, and being the scared 16-year-old I was, I would never say anything about it. We were all afraid of this guy. It took about 2 weeks before I'd really had enough of the guy and no longer gave a crap. That night we had 2 call-ins. So it was just me, another crew member, and the a-hole shift manager. It's busy enough when you're down 1 man, never mind 2. CJ was there, and my girlfriend came through the line. He hardcore began hitting on her, which royally pissed me off because CJ was married with a child, and he is ducking new. It was my girlfriend, and he just wanted to piss me off. He was always testing me and bragging about how many asses he'd kicked when he was in a gang in Michigan. I think I made him angry because I was clean-cut and polite to everyone. I had already secured another job, so I thought, duck it. This is ducking it. I'm done. I have worked as hard as I can and taken so much abusive crap here while being nice and hardworking. I'm no longer working a second with this lazy piece of a whole human crap. I told my other coworker, we'll call him Brian, that I was sorry, but I was quitting right then and walking out. I expected he would be pissed off, but he said he was coming with me. I knew in that moment that it was going to be perfect. I waited until we weren't busy and told CJ I was going to take a 10 and run out to my car. Brian came with me. We hopped in my car and drove off, and Brian didn't have a car and I gave him a lift home. We both punched out and left him completely there by himself, in rush hour. He was fired 2 weeks later when the general manager found a crack pipe in his locker. My only regret is not seeing the look on his face when he realized we were gone. Sure, it was unprofessional. I'm not like that now. This guy definitely had it coming. Story 23. Not quite a walking out story, but it essentially had the same effect. Until the end of last year, I was a supervisor in a highly stressful unit in a police control room in the UK. My manager was a bit of a knob. He was an okay guy, but was under a lot of pressure himself. He was always funny with me because he took sides with a girl who had taken an instant dislike to me from the day I started, having moved from a different police force. Things went on like that for months, but the final straw was when I started complaining about some unethical practices that were going on. Mostly systematic access to people's information for reasons not authorized and allowing staff to access confidential systems without any training. Basically, people were using the databases to get information they had no right to. My boss was complicit in all this because we were short-staffed and couldn't afford to lose staff to training. Nobody could see what was wrong with what was happening. I tried multiple times to straighten things out, but was seen as being obstructive and difficult, and making life hard for everybody. This was just weeks after we all had to sign a code of ethics. That led me to whistleblowing and reporting my concerns to the national body, who you will be pleased to know took me very seriously. There was also a frightening attitude of, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. Now I can say that is bullcrap. An officer straight up put the wrong person's details on an arrest warrant for offenses because he used an existing form and forgot to delete the name that was already on it. I crap you not. Only by me double-checking before inputting it did I notice and prevented an innocent guy from being arrested. 2 colleagues said they probably wouldn't have questioned it and just activated it. I certainly know how I would have responded had I been wrongly arrested for something like that, and it would involve a very public lawsuit. The last straw was a night shift in October. After I sent an email to one of the other managers, which I'll agree was a little sarcastic, and she, it turned out, took in good humor. My boss, however, went ballistic and called me at the start of the night shift and absolutely went furious over the phone. I was livid and shaking, and I mentioned it to my team, who were shocked. It was a quiet night, and since he filled me with a burning rage, which would have eaten me up all night, I went home sick an hour into the shift. Got a doctor's note then next day and never went back. I refused to answer my phone to my boss, who left pleading messages, but I never spoke to him again. I sent all of my reports to the professional standards unit, and after 4 weeks on sick, I negotiated with HR to leave. I became a bit of a folk hero for a short while, but I doubt anything has changed. Story 24. I used to work in a call center a long time ago. I was really good on the phone, so they made me a supervisor of a new division and gave me a plan for success. The business was healthy and robust. My new department was hiring a manager, but there was a few months when the owners were managing the department from afar. We were fairly autonomous. The plan they had for me was that when they hired a manager, he would train me to manage the office, and then I would open the new offices which were being built and would be ready in about a year. We talked about money. $80K plus bonuses when I got to the new building the following year, 1996, which was good money. What interrupted this plan was the douchebag who liked to look at the ladies on the internet. It wasn't officially adult film, nobody was doing it, but more like Playboy with scarves and crap hiding the goodie bits. Still potentially liable material considering its nature. I had asked this man to knock it off a couple times and then started with written reprimands. He refused to sign them and I hadn't the power to discharge him, but the owners were not available, so he kept doing it. Before you all start freaking out, I was young and saw it as my responsibility to handle this on my own to prove myself. At the time, I had acquired 3 unsigned reprimands. We finally got a manager, so after he got settled into his new position, I went to him with the reprimands and my concerns. The first thing he said was, well, first name, why don't you have a seat? Motioning for me to take a chair. I just got out of a meeting with some people from the NAACP because this man claims you have been harassing him because he is man. Aghast, I sat there, not knowing what to do. All I could see was the future I worked so hard at and hoped so much for crumble in front of me because of some hole. We're going to have to put you back on the phone. The next day was busy as we were getting into the holiday season. As I walked in, douchebag was sitting at the supervisor desk monitoring calls. When I walked by, he had the biggest crap-eating grin on his paw's face. I went to my cubicle and took calls for about 2 or 3 minutes and put my headset down while some woman was talking and walked out knowing my future with this employer was ruined. A month so later, I saw the guy who was kind of my helper. He told me douchebag quit about 2 weeks after me and cool dude was put into the supervisor position. I hope he has done well, and I like to think they pushed douchebag out. Story 25. I have actually walked out on 2 jobs in my life. The first was working at Walmart. Shocking, I know. I had been there for a while. Started as a part-timer at the garden department in the summer, hauling bags of dirt and rock and moving large pieces of furniture, and they liked me well enough to make me full-time, no benefits. After close to a year, they moved me to temporarily overnights to help with the ramp up to Black Friday. I worked with another employee at the toy department, moving and unloading an average of 30 pallets of freight a night, and come Black Friday worked overtime to help with the initial rush. After it was over, they wanted to keep me overnights, and I was young with nothing else going on, so I said sure. Over time, however, as people left, they kept giving me more departments to stock instead of hiring replacements. The guy who initially did toys left after Black Friday, so that was my main department, but then they had me do hardware next to it, then furniture, then sporting goods, and finally electronics. This already broke some of their rules, like the team lift rule for heavy objects and furniture, and I technically shouldn't ever leave electronics since I had the keys, all for 9 shar. After about 2 weeks of dealing with stocking so much in so little time, and finding out they were not hiring replacements to lighten the load, and being given a mediocre review for my evaluation, being told I was a little slow in finishing my duties, I went to lunch one night and never came back. Felt good. The other one I will keep short. It was a shifty company that repaired wheels. I was the one that picked up the wheels from a few major cities, then took them to the repair facility in another major city to be repaired overnight. I slept in the office, and besides the nap, I got in between shifts was the only sleep I got. And was their intention, they kept a crappy mattress there for their drivers. And it was insanely draining. One night when I called the repair manager and told him my ETA, he told me they weren't going to repair the wheels because they haven't been paid in a month. The owner wanted me to turn around and drive an extra 5 hours to another repair facility and work through Saturday to make up for it. I did not get paid hourly, and Saturday was my fiance's birthday. I took the van back to where I started and left the keys in the office. Walmart wanted me to stock half of the store by myself, and a wheel repair company was extremely crafty to its employees and didn't pay them. Story 26. My last corporate job, 25 years ago. I worked at a large firm that managed corporate real estate around the world. It was known for its top tier being total a-holes and very misogynistic policies. I was one of a few women working there. My boss was another woman who, to make it to the top tier, had become over time every bit of a hole as her peers. This was one of those jobs where you easily put 60 hours a week and always had to tread lightly, as the office politics were deadly. One day, over the intercom comes a message for me to come to the president's office. This was strange, and I was like, oh crap. So I go there and find in his office my boss and several others all laughing and drunk. And my boss holds up this report I had completed the day before. "Do you know what is wrong with this report?" she asks me. And I answer, "No, is there something I missed?" She then shows it to the others and they all laugh. And she asks me, "Isn't it obvious?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure what you're referring to." Then she gets all serious and points to the staple at the top of the report, which was stapled horizontally at the top left corner, and asks where I learned to staple things. I'm stunned and don't know what to answer. She then goes on to say the corporation has a policy on how things are stapled, and this could be a firing offense. I was gobsmacked and then got really angry and told them, "No, this is a sign that this is a ducked-up place to work," and I quit. I walked out of that office, grabbed my stuff, and left. Felt so good and never regretted that decision. Story 27. I managed the beer and wine department at a well-known importer of mid to high-end furniture and houseware decoration for a year or so. The store manager was a completely incompetent woman who had been a supervisor at a Ross or something similar and was in over her head. For the most part, she let me and my department be, as my sales were good, customers loved me, and I know lots about beer and wine. But every now and then, she would feel the need to butt in and assert herself as the manager and demand some ridiculous crap of me. Usually it was, "Make sure you're way overstocked on this product so we can sell lots of it," or something equally duh. Sometimes she would do things like place another booze order after I had already done one just to make sure. After about 8 months of this sort of thing, we had a huge overstock of some beers and wines in the back room, which was fine, but it caused me a bit of stress because she would then look at it and ask me why we had so much on the back and why it wasn't out on the floor. One day we had a section reset, meaning move all the product to different locations and rearrange everything. With over 1,000 use in hundreds and hundreds of locations, this was a healthy task, but it was dutifully chugging through it. During this reset, which was actually a whole store yearly reset, she had been particularly insufferable, micromanaging and hounding everyone and even doing things like talking crap about the supervisors and department heads behind their backs. So I was already pretty pissed at her, and a few straws away from a camel's broken back. One day I showed up for my shift to find that she had taken every extra case of beer and wine out of the back and strewn them around my department on the floor, real passive-aggressive like. Note, this was during store hours, and as soon as I showed up, I had customers complaining to me that they couldn't get their carts in through my department. She comes out in full-on Karen mode, yelling about, "Look at all this stuff, and I must not be doing my job, and why am I not incorporating it into the reset? I was, and blah, 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 and get to work, because by the end of the day, she wants all that product on the floor." I worked at it, fuming, for about 2 hours when one of the nice old lady cashiers came and told me that Mrs. Manager had been really talking up a crap storm about me and how reviews were coming up and how I was getting a poor review and such. I clocked out for my break and never came back. She called me several times a couple hours later, begging me to come back and asking why I was so upset. Story 28. Yeah, I quit a 100K job. Back in 2005, I'm working for a company that produced healthcare conferences. All of the sales and business development responsibilities for a couple of their events were mine, and my team included a conference producer, a marketing manager, and we shared some lower-level employees with other groups. The producer resigned to take another position at a different company, so the CEO asked me to handle her job until they could find a replacement. No problem. I added that role onto my already ridiculous calendar. So now I'm working with all of our sponsors, finding new ones and putting together the conference program. A month goes by and no replacement. Then the marketing guy quits. Same story. I'm asked to handle his job as well. Now I'm doing the work of 3 fairly high-level people and still killing my sales numbers, but I'm getting worn down. Working 8-6 or so in the office, going home, eating dinner, and then working to 9 or 10 most nights. Maybe a couple weeks later, we're in a meeting with all of the company managers from the various event teams, and the CEO asks why I haven't confirmed a speaker recommended by one of our top-tier sponsors. And I tell him I reached out 2 days prior, but haven't heard back. He ducking goes off on me about how I'm not doing the job I'm being paid for, and I need to be more proactive and all this other crap. During his tirade, every manager in corporate is staring in shock because they knew how much I had been doing in addition to my job. I don't say a word. The meeting ended and I go back to my office where I fire up my computer and email my resignation to my VP. Told her I couldn't give notice and it was my last day. She called the CEO and the two of them came into my office and asked why I'm leaving, and I say that I'm doing the job of 3 people for 1 salary. And him yelling was the last ducking straw. He apologizes, asks me to please stay because the event is about 90 days away and they'll be screwed up if I leave. Nope, I'm leaving. Finished packing my desk, stopped by HR to say goodbye, and let them know I expect to be paid my commissions owed, and I left. 2 weeks later, I landed a job as the director of business development for another conference company. Story 29. Nothing particularly dramatic about my story. I was working for this temp agency one summer in university. I was employed by them, and they were supposed to contract me out to local factories. Took them a long time, but they got me this nice gig packing pool cover reels. Take the aluminum reel, box it, and staple it shut. That contract was for 2 weeks. Company said they were happy with my work. Owner was nice. Too bad they couldn't hire me on full time. I just needed extra help for the busy season. After that wrapped up, I didn't hear from the agency for a while. Always got the runaround when I'd call them. Was starting to get concerned. Suddenly, they called out of the blue. Got me 2 weeks full-time work on an assembly line, packing greeting cards. Awesome. Great. I was led to believe this was a factory position. So I get to the card place. It's a big empty warehouse. I ask them where the cards are. To my surprise, it was a logistics company, and I'd be transferring boxes from one truck to another. First red flag, job wasn't what I was told. After an excruciatingly long, dull, and hot day, I say that I'll see them tomorrow. Foreman stops me and says they'll call me if they need me. That's odd. I was promised a regular 8 to 5 gig for 2 weeks by the agency. I never got any indication I was doing a poor job or anything. Just came in and did what I was told without complaining. So next morning, I'm waiting for them to call. It's past 8 a.m. start time now. So I decide to call them to see what's going on and proceed to get crap for doing so. They claimed it was only a day labor position and I shouldn't be calling them. They were being extremely rude, which they hadn't been the previous day. I'm livid at this point. My mom overhears this. No-nonsense businesswoman. Phones them back and gives them crap for lying and tells them not to call me back. I then phone the agency and give them crap for lying. Not to mention, they had only got me 2 jobs that whole summer, totaling less than 2 weeks after they had promised steady work. They tried giving me the usual BS excuses, told them never to call me again, went back to my parents' business until school started up again. Employment agency lied about the nature and length of a contract they sent me on. 2 weeks magically turned into just 1 day. Also did an all-round crafty job finding me summer work. Told them to get lost. BTW, the reason I didn't just keep working for my parents' business was because I wanted to make my own way. Figured the agency was an easier way to do so, rather than handing in dozens of resumes. They were supposedly reputable. Story 30. I have several from my teens and early 20s. I worked for an amusement park doing food catering. After 2 years, I was promoted to assistant manager. It had been a long double shift, 18 HR, 2 AR shifts, plus 2 hour breaks for me, and I was exhausted. I had just closed down my catering area, prepped for the next day, cleaned up, sent my employees home, and started to head home myself when I was flagged down by an area manager, 2 manager levels above me, and told to go help close down another catering area. So off I went. When I got there, every single one of their white tags workers were standing around, thumbs shoved up their butts. There were 12 white tags just standing around while I get pulled to clean for what would have been edging on the 20th hour at work for me. Oh, no. When I said, "Why are these white tags standing around doing nothing?" I was told they are only scheduled till close, literally written on the schedule as XCCS. So I fired back, "Well, their area isn't closed yet. Get them working or I'm walking." Suffice to say, I handed in my name tag, uniform, and time card 2 min later. Another job, I worked for the produce department at a grocery store. I walked out after chopping lettuce for 80 AR. That job wasn't worth 575 million horror. I was an asset manager at Radio Shack for 3 years. My manager got married and left the company, and the idiot they brought in was from a high-volume, high-dollar store in a very busy city. My store was less than a quarter in sales volume of his previous store, and 80% of the customers were regulars who would come in for small items. I knew most of my customers by first name. I saw them that often. The new manager immediately began sales pitching everything commissionable to everyone who walked in. People who were either sold to before or were there for their hearing aid batteries, my regulars. He just didn't understand why his tactics didn't work, and he was constantly on me for not pushing everything commissionable on every customer. Eventually, after 8 months of that insufferable high-pressure, high-stress condition, I snapped. I was supposed to open on a Sunday, my normal day to open. Typically, I was 12 close. And at 12:30, back when stores didn't open till noon and closed at 5, I get a frantic phone call, voicemail, from the district manager asking why the store isn't open yet. A dozen voicemails later, he pleaded with me to get the store open, and he would let me keep my job and move me to another store. I never did answer the phone or call him back. I was done with that. 6 months later, that store was closed down because of decreasing sales. Story 31. In college, I worked for a moving company with less than ethical business practices. They'd cookbooks so nobody ever got overtime pay, underpaid the employees, etc. For most of the summer, I just brushed it off because I was only going to be there for a few months anyway. Then, one day, one of the truck drivers hurt his hand while the truck was being loaded. He goes to the doctor, who bandages him up and puts him on some pretty powerful pain meds. The doctor tells him, "There is absolutely no way you should be driving a truck while you're on these meds." The doctor even writes/signs a note to that effect that he can bring to our boss. Fast forward to the next day. The dude is visibly wobbling and obviously out of it. He says that he told our bosses what the doctor said and showed them the note, and the bosses basically said, "That's nice, but you're scheduled to drive today." So yeah, they made the injured and clearly incapacitated guy drive an 18-wheeler. But it gets worse. As luck would have it, I'm assigned to this guy's crew today. Most of the trip out goes shockingly well, but towards the end, when we're in the customer's neighborhood, we try to maneuver around a tight turn, and Mr. Pain Meds eskees us up against a tree hard like some kind of land Titanic. Most of the cab is okay, but we get out to check the trailer. It's completely shredded on one side. There's no way it's in serviceable condition. So we get on the phone to dispatch and tell them they need to send out another trailer or cancel the job or something. We even send them pictures of the damage. Their response? Park so that the customers can't see the damage, load up as fast as you can, and leave. I should have told the customers we were putting their stuff in a wrecked trailer, but I didn't. I don't know why. Stupid college kid mistake, I guess. But we loaded their stuff up and began driving back to the warehouse. During the trip home, the trailer began falling apart more. Pieces of the wall and roof started blowing off, forcing us to put our hazards on and drive at only 30 mph. Even then, by the time we got to the warehouse, the trailer was basically topless and was missing half a wall. That night, I wrote an email to the boss detailing everything and saying that I was quitting, effective immediately. His only response was, "Okay, well, your last check will be ready in a week." Moving company forces an injured, doped-up guy to drive a truck, which he drives into a tree. The company forces us to lie to the customer and pack their stuff in an exposed and damaged trailer. Story 32. The series of events that led up to me walking out in the middle of a Friday were a year and a half in the making, and I wasn't officially fired until the next Friday. I worked at a small architecture firm during my internship time at school, and they offered me a job once I graduated. I should have continued on to my master's, because you need a master's in most states in order to become licensed, but I was convinced I didn't need it. Getting licensed. I don't enjoy being a manager anyway. So once I started my actual job at this place, they loaded me up with work I wasn't trained or even qualified to do. It was incredibly stressful in a small open office where I sat next to the president of the company. Once my big job was over, however, they began giving me stupider and stupider work to do. My sister's wedding was coming up, and I was her maid of honor. Her bachelorette party started with dinner on Friday, 2 hours away in our hometown. Me, being a meek 23-year-old, was too scared to ask my boss for half a day off at this point because they always gave me a ton of crap for taking vacation or sick time, even when I had bronchitis. So that Friday, I was doing the most stupid work ever, reading up on trash enclosures and whatnot, and my boss yelled at me for not hearing enough clicking from my mouse keyboard and to get off my phone. My family will attest that I never have my phone on me, ever. This was my breaking point, and I was livid. So lunch came. I didn't come back. I left for the dinner, got really, really drunk, and wasn't able to attend the rest of the weekend's activities because I'm a super lightweight. So the next week was very, very tense, and they fired me that Friday with the excuse that they needed a licensed architect who could work more independently. I cried for about 10 minutes in my car, went home, and immediately had a party for how happy I was. I have a new job now I've worked at for almost 2 years, and I love everyone here. It's not glamorous work I'm doing, but I've been trained, and I feel important. Story 33. I was fresh out of high school and found out the manager of a small engine repair shop was on a board with my small engine repair teacher. Perfect. Great reference. And I got my first job doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. I started there, and in the first month, they expected me to keep up with the guy who's been doing this for 4 years. They pushed me and yelled when I made a mistake so much. I got so nervous that I made constant mistakes and got yelled at more, till I felt like I was worthless and couldn't do anything right. They destroyed my self-confidence and made me feel useless. I hated getting out of bed. I dreaded going to work, and I hated my life. I just stripped out a tiny little bolt holding on an exhaust guard on a push mower and promptly got yelled at for it yet again. Later on, guess what happens? Same thing. I got so fed up I walked out on the spot, said I was leaving, packed up my tools, and walked out the side ducking door. I still felt like crap and felt useless until I got a job at an actual auto shop. I broke a rusted lug stud and started freaking out, and the lead tech said, "Aye man, you're a mechanic now. If you don't break things, you're not doing it right," and promptly taught me how to fix it. They actually ended up closing down about a month after I left, so they kind of got ducked in the end anyways. Story 34. I did it twice and went out like a rock star both times. First time, I was a marketing manager for a home improvements company. You know those enter to win $20,000 in home renovations? Well, I booked those events and trained staff to work them. After a particularly bad home show that I didn't want to do, I walked in to see my everything in and on my desk, now on the floor. My pregnant GM walks by and I ask her about it. Joe, the owner, told me to go through it. I was furious. I had a staff meeting to go to, and everyone is in there, including the owner, who never showed up. They claimed the booths were left unstaffed, which I know wasn't the case. I was arguing back and forth, and the breaking point came when Joe told me to fire my best employee, BC. He didn't work a shift. I gave him the day off to go to church with his mom, who had breast cancer. I gave a couple duck yous and walked out. Best part was, I had the next 3 months of events booked and paid for. All the confirmations and spreadsheets were on my floor with everything else that got dumped. To be nice, I put all the papers in a garbage bag for them to sort through later. Ha! I got a call from a friend the GM threw the garbage out. They lost a bunch of money. Second time, I worked as a retail manager for a zoo. When I got hired for crap money, I asked that I get a review after 90 days to discuss a raise. Well, my boss gets promoted and they hired a ditzy, incompetent young girl. I tell her about my review and she asks if she can do it next month. Okay, I say. Next month comes, I ask again, I don't know how to do a review. So I go to HR. They ask me to wait 2 weeks for her to get a review so she can review me. Okay, I say again. It comes again and she says she is going on a trip next week and asks for it to wait. I absolutely snapped. I flip my crap on her, and so bad she tells me she is scared and I need to leave her office. I go to HR and give my 2 weeks. I go back to her and tell her I quit and I'm going home for the day. Exchange some nasty ducking words and walk out. I get a call telling me to not bother with the 2 weeks from HR. Both times were the best decisions I ever made. I know work a great job I love. Story 35. Not my quitting, but one I witnessed. I worked at Substances Emporium and was in the aisle speaking to my manager. One of my coworkers, Mike, comes up to our manager and says, Joe, I gotta go. He runs to the back and comes out a minute later with his bag and skateboard. Joe stops him and asks why he's leaving. Mike says, I just want to skate. He drops his board and skates out the door. Never saw him again. Story 36. I had worked at the same job for over a year and suddenly had an allergic reaction to something environmentally. I worked night shift, and the first night my eyelids swelled up about 4 hours into the shift. The second night my eyelids swelled up 2 hours into the shift. Third night my eyelids swelled immediately. And the last night I worked there, my throat started to swell. It all happened so quickly that I had not done allergen testing yet, but I knew I couldn't work there any longer, so I left and didn't go back. To the company's credit, they paid for allergen testing, workers' comp, and out of pocket to bring workers' comp up to my base salary. It ended up being mercury in the air vents. So everyone was very happy that I had such a quick reaction because it could have hit people eventually. Story 37. I just finished school for automotive and diesel technologies after a year and a half. I applied at a shop where the job title was Diesel Mechanics Helper. It didn't pay much, but going into the diesel industry, I already expected to start at a little above minimum wage before I could develop some chops. So this shop was a place where cities throughout California sent their city buses for overhaul. I was already working a job at Pep Boys, so I was driving back and forth between 2 cities to make ends meet. I was working 14-hour days, but thankfully it didn't last very long. My very first assignment was to strip the interior of this bus and redo the trim that went around the entry stairs, and basically Mickey Mouse this thing back into place to look cute, little nicer than it did before we got it. It was all cosmetic work. Take the trim out, grind it, sand it, repaint it, and reinstall it. It didn't seem like mechanic work, but I was broke and willing to do grime work for a little bit. I figured the supervisor was testing me to see if I could work well with tools and whatnot, except all the tools I ever used were drills, grinders, and hammers. None of that a mechanic would have in his toolbox unless he had to make it work in a pinch or something. This guy was never around. He would spend his time in the manager's office, and I would see him around lunch, and that's all. I didn't feel like I had anybody to watch me and see if I was doing well enough to be moved to the engine shop. Anyway, this last 2 weeks, every day I hoped he would come by and at least show some interest in his new employee and see how progress was coming, but no. It didn't take long to see we were all just a bunch of worker bees, and we were all replaceable in a moment's notice. So the Monday on the 3rd week, I come in and we have a new fleet of buses in shop, and I get put on the same exact task I had been doing for 2 weeks. I was livid. When everyone went to grab tools, I walked to the HR and said I was out. It ended being the best thing that happened to me, because just a couple months later, I landed a sweet gig that I've been at almost 3 years working on trains. Story 38. I was 16 years old, working at a grocery store. I asked for my sister's wedding off. They gave me the wedding, but scheduled me 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., so I was going to miss the reception. Showed up to work, they told me the drain in the bathroom had backed up and handed me a goddamn shovel. I was never a quitter before then, and I haven't been a quitter since. But on that day, I was most definitely a quitter. Story 39. I'll try not to give away too many specifics, but a couple of years ago, I walked out of a 40K job because it pushed me to having a panic attack which wouldn't stop. I had only been there 4 months. I took the job as a client manager for a company which supplied perishables and was stoked at the challenge. Unfortunately, they hadn't made it clear that the client managers at this company were responsible for a ridiculous amount of non-CM stuff because a vast proportion of the workforce spent more time complaining that staff wasn't their job than actually doing the job they were paid to do. For some reason, this CM job included new project management, stock management of both raw materials and finished goods, production management, etc., etc., etc. Their output was vast, or at least it should have been. I might stick it out if I had been given a modicum of training, guidance, or support. Instead, on the first day, I was handed an account that hadn't been managed for months with a retinue of furious, disgruntled clients all over the world and a warehouse full of products that was about to go off. It would have been nice to turn it around, but ultimately I realized I had boarded a sinking ship and someone had pushed me in front of the wheel. After a few weeks, I was sick all the time, from working 15-hour days. A couple weeks more, and I kept having panic attacks from all the stress. At 16 weeks, I walked into work one morning, instantly started having a panic attack, and went to the toilets to quietly sit it out, only to find that it wouldn't stop. I went home, phoned my manager, and told him I wouldn't be back. When I told him why, he basically just sighed and agreed that the company was ducked. I took a couple of months out to get my head back together and found a wonderful new career path that involves never ever having to talk to customers again. Whoops! Halved my salary. Story 40. Walmart, overnight stock. I was tasked with fully stocking and fronting several departments a night. Just me, in addition to assisting the drunk weirdos that wander Walmart at 2 a.m. Many, if not most of the boxes on the pallets were not labeled in any way, so I had to physically cut open each box to see what was inside. Often, the items were for a completely different department, had no corresponding SKU on the shelf, or was already way overstocked. Any excess crap had to be restacked on the pallets like some hellish Jenga tower and placed back in the stockroom before the shift was over. If things took longer, I'd be given verbal warnings and threatened with write-ups. They promised me another employee to help out, as I was still pretty new. Every night, we'll have someone with you tomorrow. Instead of directly hiring additional employees, Walmart went with a fly-by-night temp agency whose workers weren't eligible for termination from Walmart. Basically, they could duck around the whole time and not be held accountable. And it showed. The temp workers couldn't give less of a crap about getting anything done, and any admonishment was passed on to me since I was an actual employee. Our supervisors also did this thing where, before every shift, we were required to gather in the back for goal sharing and talk about the current Walmart stock share price. This was supposed to motivate us, or whatever the hell they teach in middle management training. We were getting paid minimum wage, and that wasn't going to change. What the duck did we care about the stocks? What broke me wasn't even really related to the job. My friend was having a party for his birthday, and I previously turned down the invitation because of work. After staring at the unblinking fluorescent deadlights for a minute, it was overwhelmingly obvious to me I'd rather and should be at the party, and that if one bridge was worth burning, it was Walmart. Walked out, got fired, found another job in a week. No regrets, I won't even shop at that crap hole. Story 41. Back when Little Caesars only sold $5 hot and ready pizzas on Tuesdays, our local restaurant would have a random employee dress in their Little Caesar mascot costume and hold up a hot and ready Tuesday $5 sign on the side of the road. After 3 weeks of working there, they voluntarily told me to be Little Caesar. Our Caesars is located in a strip mall, about 100 yards or so away from the road. It was a pretty hot Tuesday afternoon in my town of Yuma, Arizona, around 110 degrees. My boss told me that they would bring me back to the restaurant every half hour to get me cooled off and for bathroom breaks and water, etc. So they loaded me onto the back of a pickup and dropped me off by the side of the road, where I was instructed to dance around and hold up the sign. Sounds easy enough. Anyway, after about 2 hours and no sign of my boss, I had enough. I took the Caesar head off and waddled back to the restaurant, where I found my boss sitting out front smoking and the rest of the employees just sitting around because the place was empty. Boss lady yelled at me and told me to put the head back on and get back to the side of the road. I threw the head into the parking lot, told her to do it herself, grabbed my crap from the back room and left. Story 42. I went out to buy lunch and left my phone on my desk in my office. When I came back, I saw my boss, who had just started a week prior to this, sitting at my desk going through my personal cell phone. When I asked her what she was doing, she said, "You left this on company property? I can go through your phone or your computer at any time. I am your boss. You know that, right?" We were a very small team of 3 people before she started, so things like this just didn't happen. Our previous boss had left about 6 months before the board hired a replacement. So we had been working without any leadership for quite some time and were functioning very well. This new hire decided that we were all incompetent gits and treated us all like we had no idea what we were doing. She decided that she wanted to know exactly what I was doing at every second of the day, so she was checking my phone, and later I found out my email every time I left the office. I actually found out a few months after I left that on her first day, she arranged for all of the employee emails to be forwarded to her without telling any of us. I ended up not even responding to her. I just grabbed my phone out of her hand and walked out. Not only had I taken on way more responsibility after the first manager left, but I had also started putting in about 20 more hours of work every week just to make sure everything was still running smoothly while we were down one person. I was already very frustrated with the job and would have ended up leaving regardless. But had this one incident not happened, she would have had at least 2 weeks' notice and the opportunity to have me train a replacement. Story 43. I had a fat Karen of a staff manager. I was a busser during my freshman summer of college. It was a country club one of my friend's dads ran, and when I came for my interview, she didn't introduce herself or get up from the couch she was sitting on. She sarcastically told me good luck because she didn't know I knew the GM. She was shocked when I got introduced and then gave me a too small shirt and screamed at me my second day on the job. I gave her that crap right back, and that's where her hatred of me began. I worked with my best friend too. We would get so much crap done on busy nights together. It was weird how good we were at it when we were in the same area, but this fat Karen of a manager would do crap like put me in the least crowded area and then put the 80-year-old guy outside at the busy area just to split us up, only to come running in, as fast as she could waddle, and tell me switch 20 minutes into dinner. Intermission. Me and my best friend were a huge ducking addict. Huge. We were high all the time, from before work, breaks, whatever. However, we were discreet, and the manager above the fat Karen, who wasn't the GM, had me and my best friend get him weed multiple times on shift, and he let us smoke on the golf holes after work and made us drinks while watching. The final straw came when I came in stoned after a lunch break. She just started careening like no other, and she kept going. It was a Friday afternoon, we were trying food, and dinner service didn't start for 4 hours. After a while, I was like, my best friend's going on vacation tomorrow. I'm not paying for cabs the next 2 days to work for this fat Karen. Told my friend's dad I was going back to school early. Gave hugs to all the staff. They were ducking amazing top to bottom. Loved them all from the kitchen to maintenance, and told her I was gone. Her shocked, angry face when she said, I guess you just don't give a duck? I said nope and walked out. Smoked ever after that. Ducked the service industry. Story 44. In high school, working at a multiplex. Crap pay, but free movies and a lot of shenanigans with the staff. Manager held a meeting to clamp down on the fun. Everyone got up and quit right there and then. Heard the manager got fired that night. Story 45. I worked at a Mexican restaurant for a year and a half. After a year of working there, a supervisor left, and our district manager said I was ready for that role. Started learning how to close out the cash registers at night and do some things on our computer. Never needed to learn that, though, as my general manager hired her cousin and made her supervisor. I went to my district manager and was able to get a raise from him, however. Then we got a new manager who singled me out all the time. One morning, I showed up to opening 5 minutes late, and he went off on me. I just hung out and barely worked during my shift. Then, right as my manager told me he was going on break, I told him I was leaving. Did that so that asshole couldn't have a break that day. Felt good. Story 46. I was 18 working at a Pizza Hut sub shop. I was there a year. I liked it at first, and all the other workers were cool. The owner could be a git at times, yelling and calling names, but I mostly ignored it. Then one day he was talking with a guy who was visiting him. He and the other guy kept looking at me and another worker as they were talking. Being that they were from Greece and talking their language, I had no idea what they were saying. But the girl I was working with did understand. I asked her what they were talking about and why they kept looking at us. She said that the owner was telling the guy that he could have either one of us, just pick which one. I was horrified. I looked right at both of them and said, no, it's not going to happen. They just laughed, but they didn't bother me after that. A while later, it was a Friday afternoon and we were prepping a bunch of stuff, being that our busiest night was soon approaching. The owner told me, do something, so I go do it. Then he starts yelling at me. You never listen. You never do what you are told. What is wrong with you? You are stupid. I tried to explain to him that I was sorry that I misunderstood him, but because of his accent, I thought he said something else. He's not hearing it, keeps cutting me off. So I stop talking and just continue to work while he loses his mind yelling. About 15 minutes after he cools down and about 1.5 hours before the rush hits, I take a deep breath, take off my apron, and head for the door. The owner says, hey, are you going? I tell him, I am going home, that I quit. He says, you can't leave, we are getting busy soon. I told him that it was too bad and that he should have thought of that before he started yelling at me. Bye, story 47. Actually, totally forgot I also walked out on my first job. Spent 9 months at Walmart as an unloader. Probably the most crap job at one of the most crap companies to work for. You could maybe make a case for bathroom cleaners, I suppose. We're basically a bunch of teens to just out of high school kids back there. And because you're young and want a job, you'll do everything and anything the managers tell you. Throw a truck in 100-degree plus heat in Texas with no AC or readily available water stations? Sure, boss. Go outside in freezing temps while it's snowing to push carts because the cart pushers walked out, so now it's your job? Sure, boss. Go clean up some customers' piss or vomit because maintenance is on break and the company doesn't want to be liable if someone slips in it? Sure, boss. 9 months of doing anything and everything the manager tells you for minimum wage. But that last day of my 9 months was the last straw. I hurt my back throwing a truck and go sit down in the break room. Store manager comes in at night on some random check and asks why there's only one unloader. They tell him I hurt my back, and this is unacceptable to him. He tells my manager to text me and demand that I come back and finish my shift. She says, Walt says blah blah blah. So I text back, duck Walt. She shows the text to Walt, and he storms into the break area and yells, I'm terminated. I get up, throw my name tag at his face, and tell him I quit, but he'll be hearing about my workman's comp since I hurt my back on duty. And management is supposed to drive me to a clinic, not tell me to get back to work. Glad to hear Walt was later demoted for losing the store 80 grand due to poor management, story 48. Working at McDonald's back in the 90s as a teenager was pretty sweet. I hung out with my friends all day, talking to cute girls at the counter and getting the occasional phone number. Plus, at night when we closed up and had to empty the milkshake machine, we got free milkshakes. The problem was half the managers were pretty decent college students just trying to get their crap together, and the other half were incompetent adults who literally could not do anything, including this. One particular manager, let's call her Tracy, because that was her ducking name, was the worst of all. Throughout the day, she would swap people's tills and not even say that she did it. She would put multiple people on a single till and never held anyone accountable until the end of the night when counting down. One glorious day during the summer break, she swapped 5 people, including 2 trainees on my till, and at the end of the night, my till was $60 short. Go figure. Perhaps someone stole it, or maybe it genuinely was an honest mistake somewhere. But she was holding me accountable and told me I would have it taken out of my check. We argued for a bit and I said, fine, I quit. She told me that's fine. After you finish out this week, you can go wherever you like, and I replied, I realize you are only coloring with 1 crayon upstairs, so let me explain this to you slowly. I quit right now. Do not expect me to come back ever again. What am I supposed to do about your shift the rest of the week? She asked. Not my problem, I replied as I turned and walked out the door. Went to work at Chick-fil-A instead for the rest of the summer, and no regrets were had. Story 49. I was washing cars for about a year while taking care of my dad at home. So I was done dealing with people because my dad was already hard to deal with. After some time, they made me night manager, and boss comes in and says, we'll give you a quarter raise. Oh wow, $8.50 an hour. What was bullcrap about it is that the night manager had the most important job. The dealership was constantly getting burglarized. So if the keys weren't checked and locked up, you'd have money riding off the lot. What made it extra worse is that the managers got paid on packs, new cars that come wrapped up, that the workers did. Everybody, including me, was barely scratching $300 a week, while the manager did no physical work besides move cars and easily made close to $2 grand a month. Not to mention, during slower times, they'd send us home. I remember getting a check for $75 once. All I wanted was $9 an hour. They wouldn't even give me that, and several times I'd have to deal with workers that wouldn't want to do crap or staying very late past closing when I needed to be home with my dad. I did their work, the salesman liked me, and I was loyal. I had to put value in myself. I'm not slaving away with crafty coworker and a manager that would literally come at any time on his day off to pick up his $500 plus a week checks and then bail. So I had my brother come get me and I was gone. Now I work an office job. We just moved to work at home, so after I waste the next 3 hours, I'll be working at home, making way more than I did with them, and only coming in once every 3 weeks. Story 50. I was working at FedEx Ground, hired on as seasonal and lasted a few months. I worked morning shift and night 3.5 HRs each shift. We worked straight through with no breaks any shift. Days, I not only sort boxes, but because we are short-staffed, they call for me to help unload the trailers. Or they would call me to fill in for someone going back and forth going from my place to several other positions. Well, as I'm sorting, I have to push boxes down the rollers to 2 other people for them to sort onto pallets. A lady that is not strong enough always asks me to help lift. When I do, I miss boxes coming down the chute. Well, this goes on for months, and when boxes fall, she refused to pick them up that are right next to her. I mean, next to her feet. She would ask me to come down and pick them up. After a while, I refused, and then management was called down to ask me why I wouldn't help her. I said, y'all have me running around here with several positions, and now y'all want me to do parts of her job that she can't do. I want some more money. Manager acted like I was offensive and told me upper management wanted to see me after the sort. I had enough, and when I went to the The guy told me in a stern and angry voice to close the door and sit down. I said, "No, I'm just gonna go home." Then he yells at me to close door, sit down. I repeated that I had already resigned. More yelling at his part, but I stood up for myself and just walked out. Felt good. Story 51. Worked at a small company designing online courseware. Was working on a huge course with a lot of info. Having a very troublesome button that I couldn't get to work correctly, so I called a third-party company for some help. They were able to assist and the button tested fine. Tell boss that the course is done and ready to be uploaded live. Course costs $1,000 to load live each time. Get it loaded, button does not work. Boss calls the company to ask why. Company gives some BS reason. Boss asks if I talk to them. Company says no. What the heck? Boss calls me down to his office, immediately starts screaming at me and pounding his fist on his desk. Normal behavior when he gets upset with his employees. Boss is older, but a large man, over 6'4" and 240 lbs. I was young, maybe 6 foot, and 165 lbs wet and wearing boots. As he is pounding his fist, tells me, "I will kick your ass if you duck up again. I'm out now then," was my only response. Boss loses his crap, screams more. I get up and walk out of his office down to mine. As he follows me, screams at me, berates me, calls me names, all in front of all the other employees. I pack my stuff up, go to turn off my PC, only to get yelled at again. "Don't touch my crap. Just get the duck out of my office and my site, you piece of crap." Okay. Story 52. I had a manager who disliked me. I honestly couldn't tell you why, but she constantly had me scheduled for difficult and long closing shifts by myself. This chain restaurant. That was fine. 3 months later, I'm still the only person closing. I know it isn't because I'm the only person with the schedule to allow it. One night I had 4 tables, one of which was a difficult one. You know, the ones always trying for free crap? Came in 15 mins before close and all around rude. Finally, they throw their fit, get the manager, and insist that she serve them instead of me. Had to listen to them trash, tell me loudly as I worked my other tables for another hour. Finally checking out, and the manager said to me, "They were fine people. It was just you." It wasn't the worst thing ever said to me, but I snapped, said some unkind things and left. I'm not proud of it, but she was the least supportive manager I ever had. Gave people free crap all the time. Would take my food to the wrong tables. Bust a table completely clean while the guest was in the bathroom. Seat me while I was on break or in the bathroom and constantly write me up for her duck-ups. I love that job, but she ruined it for me. Story 53. I worked at Pizza Hut years ago. Just an easy side job while I was in school. Our manager got promoted to a district position, so they brought in a new manager. She was from another chain. She had no idea how to run Pizza Hut. I trained her on a few things. She was lost and useless. It blew my mind how she couldn't do anything. We went from top restaurant in the state to 30-something in about 2 months. Rather than trying to fix the situation, she starts firing people. She would just sit in her office while the place went to crap. I got wind that she was going to fire me, so I stripped off my uniform. I threw it all on the front counter and yelled back to her office, "Since you're a coward, I quit. You're such a pussy, you can't even fire someone, right?" I walked away and didn't look back. Come to find out, she fired nearly half the store's crew and all the leads and managers. She ended up working 7 days a week. Story 54. I just did this last Tuesday. I work for a startup that I saw grow from 80 people to 800. I started developing VR experiences to help design our product and attract investors, all on my own. Then, after a year and a half of developing an awesome system that attracted millions in investment, they decided to give it to marketing and wanted to put me in a corner solving their other people's mismanaged projects. I know where I want to take my life, and I would never let such a short-sighted vision control my career. I quit, and they have asked me to take this week off paid to reconsider. I told them they are just throwing their money away. I already have a couple offers, but I think I will take a month off to really see where I want to take my career. It really goes to show you that you should always have a backup plan. Once a company has control over your life and your career, you are at the whims of management. Luckily, I always have a backup plan, and I have a huge network and people who understand the value I bring to a company. I will leave a bunch of stock that could potentially be worth a couple $100,000, maybe even millions, but to sit in a corner and see some guy take my baby and get all the credit would have been unacceptable to me. I'd rather do what brings me joy today than be miserable for 3 years, hoping some stocks will make me some money. Money will always come and go, but time is finite, and you can't make that back. Story 55. This was a while ago, when sharing login credentials was the norm. I had a great job at a very, very large company everyone has heard of. I had a great boss. Things were getting done. Everything was smooth. Then we got hit with a reorg. My boss got promoted out. We had a temporary new boss that got fired because he had no idea what he was doing. Then we ended up with someone else that was able to pretend he knew what he was doing well enough to hold the job. Things got much worse quickly. I was very good at my job, and someone older than me didn't like that. I knew he didn't like me, and I was expecting him to make a move. He did. One Friday night when I had some scheduled work after Cobb, he logged in and sabotaged me. He basically broke our directory service system while I was doing upgrades. What he didn't know is that I was logging every command typed and printing them out in real time. I spent the entire weekend fixing things. Also logged. I barely slept. I had everything up and running again on Sunday night. No major business impact. To make this more interesting, my father was half dead in the hospital at the time. I went in on Monday and requested the day off. Not exactly a strange request, but like I said, this boss wasn't very good. He blamed the outage on me and said I had to stay for the day. I handed him the printouts, probably close to 100 pages, and walked. Got a better job shortly after that. Story 56. I found myself doing relatively menial work, unjamming the fax machine, running mail merge reports, at a job that I thought was going to be more about building software and systems to run the business. After a few years, I really had the feeling that I was wasting my time and not making use of my education and experience. I had been listening to a lot of Jonathan Coulton, and I kept having a real emotional reaction to the song A Talk with George. These lyrics still hit me over the head. Don't live another day unless you make it count. There's someone else that you're supposed to be, something deep inside of you that still wants out. And shame on you if you don't set it free. Try playing that every day on the way to your unfulfilling job and see how long you keep it. The last straw, though, was my personality conflict with the new office manager. She treated me like crap from the start, and the tension just built. One day I was called upon to do something and I don't even remember, but it involved me asking for clarification or explaining to her what it would take to get it done. She said, "I don't have time for this," and turned her back and walked away while I was talking. That something finally snapped, and I simply walked straight out the door, went home, and emailed my resignation. Today is my 3-year anniversary of starting a dream job at Google. Thank you, Jonathan Coulton, for helping me move on to bigger and better things. Story 57. Underemployed as hell following the 2008 crash, working in a menial office job with a team of similarly underemployed coworkers, all getting back on their feet. Our one other coworker, for whom this was the best/highest job she had ever had after a life of retail and service work, made our lives a living hell with nosiness, micromanaging, snipping, bus throwing under, and other toxic behavior. When we finally banded together to go to HR after several months of this, their solution was to make her our supervisor, since she was acting like it already. In utter disbelief, I gathered my things and walked out in the middle of the day. 2 other coworkers went with me. Story 58. Obligatory. Not me, but a close friend of mine at this restaurant I work at. We have some pretty crazy and bipolar management. 2 brothers run this cool, family-style Italian restaurant and pizzeria, but one is a complete nut and git, while the other is this flat-out idiot, but he's super cool. They alternate days running the restaurant. At any rate, one lunch shift, my good friend, another waitress, is sitting at the front desk on the restaurant side of the place, waiting for guests to come in so she can seat them. It's completely empty. Literally the only sound you could hear were the guests chatting in the pizzeria. The 2 sections are connected, and the low hum of the air conditioning. She gets a text from her mom, or someone texting from her mom's phone, that she's in the hospital and just had a heart attack. She breaks out in sob right there. Lo and behold, a whole brother was working that afternoon. He comes over to the pizzeria side to check on how busy it was and just starts berating this girl for crying in the restaurant. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "You can't cry. Come on, pull yourself together now." Through her sobs, she goes, "It's empty. There's no one here, and my mother just had a heart attack. You don't want me to not cry? Go to the bathroom. Clean up. You have side work." And that was the end of it. She called him a tyrant, went to the hospital right then and there to be with her mom, and didn't come back. Story 59. I was working as a restaurant cashier in a tribal-owned casino when I was 19. I had been working there since I was 15, so I knew my way around, and had I been 21, I could have been a supervisor. Anyway, they hire a new supervisor, and she knew absolutely nothing about running a shift or how to do any of the jobs. She ended up hiring her girlfriend as a waitress. It was horrible. More often than not, she would be in the back shouting orders at the waitstaff or rolling silverware in a dinner rush. As cashier, I ended up voiding and offering the discounts when she would throw her access card at me when I went to get her attention. At one point, I had to work 3 jobs because she didn't schedule anyone and let her girlfriend have the night off. I was the hostess, waitress, and the cashier, and I couldn't keep any of the tips. She split them up between the other employees, and I was pissed. Anyway, the night I quit the restaurant was packed due to the powwow the casino was hosting and fireworks, so I ended up doing the 3 jobs thing. She was in the back of the house, slowly rolling silverware and talking to the cooks while I ready to pass out. I called the CSM on duty and walked up to her with my ID card, slapped it down on the table, and walked out. I was fired apparently for neglect of duties, but I haven't looked back. Story 60. former supervisor had serious anger management issues. They hit like a bullet, but he'd be fine shortly afterward. However, the thing with a bullet is that when fired, they often cause destruction. In my case, I was working as an order picker, and I was down an aisle doing my job when the supervisor screams at the top of his lungs, "Duck!" And a second later, I hear something crash on the floor near me. Less than 5 feet away was a brass camlock that weighed about 10 pounds. Now I was on one side of my cart, but if I had been on the other, I could have very well been hit by that thing. I clocked out at the end of the day and went home. This was a Thursday. I called in sick on the Friday and went to a temp agency on the Monday, started working somewhere else on the Tuesday. Anyhow, I contact the manager a year later as I'm late in filing my taxes and I need my T4. In Canada, it's a form that lists all that's earned and deducted, and I bring up why I had left. The manager basically said, "That's just how he is," and effectively dropped it. Hello. He has serious anger issues, damn near nails an employee in the head with a heavy brass item, and that's all it warrants. I'm glad I left there. It was an absolute joke of a place to work. While I appreciated the opportunity, it was a unilaterally pathetic existence. Story 61. First day on the job as a registered nurse at some company. They had agreed to pay me a certain wage. I'm on my first day of boring paperwork orientation when I see a lot of red flags. The kicker is when the manager said, "For orientation, you'll be paid minimum wage." I walked out and didn't return their calls. Seriously, they called me wanting to work with them again for years, so they wouldn't pay me for the time I had already worked. 5 years later, the Attorney General's office finally tracked me down and mailed me a check for my pay. Story 62. I walked gloriously out of McDonald's because some idiot 30-year-old decided one week he didn't like me, so he got me suspended the following week. I'm in HS and used to only work weekends because we used our cell phones at 4 p.m. on a Friday while doing nothing in the back. Everyone else had hours, except me because I was the one he made an example of. 30 minutes later, the guy who was working grill with me walks in using his phone, says hi to idiot, and clocks in normally, and we sit and shoot the crap. Waiting till 5:30 to start getting ready for dinner rush. At one point, idiot looks at me and I point at other dudes, who is a close friend, which is why I called him out. He knows I was doing it to make a point. Phone and gave him a puzzled look. An idiot loudly said, "That rule only applies to Mexicans," and turned around and went back to what he was doing. Now, first of all, I'm not Mexican. I'm Puerto Rican. They all know this, but idiot likes being a banana to me. And my friend looked back at me with a WTF look, and I stormed to the front of the store, took off my shirt, threw it at his head, and told him I was done with his crap. And that concluded my time at McDonald's. My friend quit a few weeks later, and now we occasionally go 15 mins before close and make him make us fresh breakfast items. Story 63. I was a cashier at Burger King and I had food poisoning or something. I started vomiting in the middle of my shift, literally throwing up in a garbage can next to the cash register. I asked repeatedly to go home and the manager wouldn't let me because we were short-handed. So I texted my boyfriend when the manager wasn't looking, and as soon as he showed up, I just walked out the door. I don't care if she thought I was hungover or what. I was standing right next to food. She's lucky nobody called the health department. Story 64. I worked at a hotel for 2 years, never called in, always showed up, worked extra shifts if they needed me, provided customer service above and beyond what was asked of me. There was this one Karen who kissed ass to the desk supervisor. The rest of us would end up working crafty random shifts while she always got a steady schedule and holidays and weekends off. My sleep was so ducked up I started having headaches and my body was getting worn out. We got a new manager who forced the supervisor to give us all reasonable schedules. I was placed on nights all month long one May, except for one ducking day. She had put me on Sunday, Mother's Day morning, when the suck-up was supposed to be there. I said, "Nope, duck this place." I called the accountant and the manager, and they came in and begged me to reconsider. But I said very plainly how crafty we were all treated and that I was done, and I left. I called all my coworkers and told them not to answer the phone, so the supervisor or her butt buddy would have to cover the shift. This was just the thing that finally broke my patience. She once wrote 4 nasty letters to me and hung them around the desk because I lined up the hot pockets in the freezer in a way she hadn't approved. Story 65. I worked at Target for a while, and it was horrible. They have no respect for their employees and will make you uphold rules. But as soon as a customer asks to speak to a manager, the manager breaks the rule and throws you under the bus right in front of the customer. It was humiliating. You'd get in trouble for talking to coworkers. You'd get in trouble for checking your phone. You'd get in trouble for finishing your section too early and having nothing to do. I'd asked to be trained in other departments so I could have some variety. They'd promised to do so and then totally ignore me. When I asked if I'd be qualified for a tiny promotion, literally 50-cent raise, my supervisor actually laughed in my face, and even though I was widely acknowledged as one of the hardest and most efficient workers in the department. The final breaking point for me, though, was when I spoke to my supervisor and asked that I not be scheduled during certain hours so that I could go to college. She told me, of course, and to just put it into the request system and she'd approve it. Next day, I checked the system and my scheduling request has been denied. I immediately walked into HR and told them I was putting in my 2 weeks notice, and then passed out my remaining shifts to my coworkers so I never had to come back. I still have nightmares about working there.